I never thought I was the kind of person who would believe in ghost stories or urban legends. But everything changed when my friend Marcus and I moved into an old, drafty house on the edge of town. I usually depend on logic and reason, so I tried to ignore the strange feelings at first. Still, the house made its presence known in ways that were more than just creaky floors. Marcus had been my closest friend since university. Whenever I told him I felt like someone was watching me while I washed the dishes in the evening, he would laugh. He strongly believed in science and structure. He often reminded me that old wood moves naturally, and that the wind can whistle through the original window frames. Even when I told him about sudden cold spots that seemed to follow me from the hallway to the living room, he rolled his eyes and said I was thinking too much. I tried to accept his practical way of thinking because the rent was very cheap and the location was perfect for my daily life. Still, a heavy feeling in the air never went away. The first few weeks were mostly quiet, except for the normal sounds you would expect from a house that was decades old. One evening, while I was arranging books on the shelves in the study, I clearly heard the sound of a heavy chair being dragged across the floor in the room above me. I knew Marcus was still at his evening fitness class, so I stood still and waited to hear something else. But the whole house suddenly became very silent in a way that felt suffocating. When Marcus finally came home, I told him about the dragging sound. He joked that maybe the house was tired of sitting still for so many years. He said it was probably the neighbor's dog hitting a shared wall, or just pipes shaking in the old ventilation system. I wanted to believe him so much that I forced a smile and agreed that my imagination was probably working too hard after a long day. A few days later, the strange events changed from small noises to physical things that were harder for me to ignore or explain. Every morning I found the kitchen cabinets wide open, even though I clearly remembered closing them before going upstairs to sleep. Marcus suggested that maybe I was sleepwalking because of stress from my recent work projects. He gave me a kind look, but it felt more like pity than real support. I even left my phone recording audio at night, hoping to catch proof that something mechanical was wrong. But the recordings always came back with only static and silence. Even without any recorded proof, the kitchen always felt thick and damp, as if someone had just taken a long, hot shower nearby. I started spending more time at the local library just to avoid the heavy feeling of being an unwelcome guest in my own rented home. On one rainy Tuesday morning, Marcus told me during breakfast that he had a late shift at work and would not return until after midnight. I stayed home to finish a freelance project. I tried to ignore the steady sound of rain tapping against the old kitchen windows. As evening came, the house felt darker than usual. I turned on every light in the hallway just to feel safer. I worked on my laptop while sitting on the sofa. From time to time, I looked at the front door and wondered if the locks were really strong enough. I kept telling myself that the deep shadows in the corners of the room were only reflections from the streetlights outside during the storm. The wind started to blow loudly through the chimney. It made a sound that almost sounded like a person whispering words I could not understand. Around 10 o'clock, I decided to take a short break. I went upstairs to my room to get a warm sweater because it had become much colder. While I was standing in front of my closet, I clearly heard the heavy front door close and the deadbolt slide into place. I immediately felt relief, thinking that Marcus had finished work early and had come home to be with me. From the top of the stairs, I called out that I was happy he was home and said that the storm was getting very strong. I did not hear him answer with words, but I heard the familiar sound of heavy boots walking across the wooden floor toward the kitchen. At first, the sound comforted me as I listened to the floorboards creak under the weight of someone I trusted completely. I stayed at the top of the stairs for a moment while pulling my sweater over my head, listening to the sounds downstairs in the dark. I heard the refrigerator door open. Then I heard the sharp metal sound of silverware moving inside the kitchen drawer, as if someone was looking for a fork. Next, I heard the clear sound of a heavy ceramic plate being placed on the granite counter with a loud thud that echoed through the quiet house. I spoke out loud, saying that I was hungry too, and asking if he had brought takeout from the small place we liked. I began walking down the stairs, but I stopped when I heard the microwave start humming steadily, followed by the high beeping sound of the timer. My heart started beating faster as I reached the last step, fully expecting to see my friend standing there under the warm light of the stove. I walked into the dark kitchen and quickly noticed that the main ceiling light was still turned off, even though I had just heard so much activity. The air felt extremely cold, almost like stepping into a large freezer. My breath caught in my chest as I looked around the room. The microwave display was glowing with a bright green 0, showing that the timer had just finished when I reached the doorway. I reached to switch on the main light, expecting to see a plate of food or a hot cup of coffee on the counter. But the room was completely empty. The countertop was clean and smooth, just as it had been when I wiped it earlier. My heart started beating fast when I noticed that the microwave door was wide open, yet there was nothing inside it. I stood there in total silence, trying to understand why I had heard heavy boots and silverware moving when I was clearly alone. I walked to the front door and checked the lock. The deadbolt was still tightly locked from the inside, exactly as I had left it. The heavy rain kept hitting the sides of the house, but there were no wet footprints on the floor, and no sign that anyone had entered. Suddenly, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I took it out and saw a new message glowing on the dark screen. It was a text from Marcus. He said his shift was running late and that he was just about to leave the office. A cold chill ran down my back when I realized that the person I had heard coming into the house could not have been him. I dropped my phone on the floor when I heard the sound of slow, heavy breathing coming from the dark corner of the pantry behind me. I was too afraid to turn around. I felt frozen as I understood that whatever was in the house had copied his routine perfectly. Suddenly, the microwave turned on by itself. Its inside light flickered wildly, and the glass plate began spinning very fast. I ran toward the stairs, my feet barely touching the steps as I rushed to my room to lock the door. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the corner of my bed, staring at the door handle and listening carefully. The sounds from the kitchen continued until morning. The metal sound of forks touching, and the slow, repeated noise of a heavy chair being dragged across the floor. When Marcus finally came back, I told him everything that had happened. I explained all the sounds and what I had experienced. He did not fully believe me, but he tried to comfort me. He said it was probably stress or fear, and suggested that we could change the house if I was not feeling comfortable. A few months later, we moved out and changed the house. During those months, there were still small, strange things now and then, but nothing very serious or as frightening as that night.